So you'll vote in favor of the amendment?
I'm voting that I am going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. And all of that stuff is unacceptable. So I'll be voting no for that reason.
I think it's incredible that anyone in the media can have a conversation about Kamala Harris allegedly flip-flopping on anything when Donald Trump is giving us a masterclass in the last 24 hours in like the literal definition of flip-flopping.
After 24 hours of intense backlash from his evangelical conservative base, Donald Trump publicly flip-flopped on one of the biggest issues of the election. And now it's up to us to make sure he pays a political price. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, this is a follow-up to a video that we did yesterday. Donald Trump's relationship politically with abortion has been complicated. You can tell, as somebody who's not particularly religious, he personally probably doesn't care about abortion. I would speculate he has participated in abortions before or paid for them. He's probably indifferent to them as a whole. But as the leader of the Republican Party, that's not a place that he can politically afford to be in. He has repeatedly publicly taken credit for the overturning of Roe v. Wade by selecting the 3 Supreme Court justices, which gave the court the conservative supermajority needed to overturn Roe. And since that happened, he has repeatedly taken credit for, I'm the one who got rid of Roe. People have been trying to do it for years. I did it. Then he has enough sanity in him to recognize that it's politically a dangerous issue for him because it's cost Republicans election after election after election after election. So he simultaneously has to be as pro-life or pro-forced birth as possible, but also libertarian enough not to drive away moderates and independents. This is what happened last night. On the subject, since Donald Trump is a resident of Florida, and Florida will have a ballot referendum about guaranteeing a constitutional right to an abortion, overturning Governor Ron DeSantis' 6-week abortion ban, every Florida resident who is an eligible voter will get to vote on that. Donald Trump was recently asked about it. I'm going to give you his most recent answer. This is the latest flip-flop. This is the latest flop. And this is what he said to Fox News.
You voting yes or no on Amendment 4 in Florida?
So I think 6 weeks, you need more time than 6 weeks. I've disagreed with that right from the early primaries. When I heard about it, I disagreed with it. At the same time, the Democrats are radical because the 9 months is just a ridiculous situation where you can do an abortion in the 9th month. And, you know, some of the states like Minnesota and other states have it where you could actually execute the baby after birth. And all of that stuff is unacceptable. So I'll be voting no for that reason.
You voting?
So he is going to vote no on a constitutional right to an abortion in Florida because of what he says goes on in other blue states. Florida's a red state run by a very conservative Republican governor. You're going to vote no on that amendment because of what goes on in Minnesota, which, by the way, he just flat out lied despicably about what goes on. You know, in Minnesota, they can execute babies after birth. Total lie, despicable lie, disgusting lie. How does this make sense? It's because he is still right now desperately trying to have a foot in both worlds. He wants to please his evangelical base by supporting very strict abortion laws. But he also wants to be seen as reasonable enough not to scare away moderates, independents, and suburban women. He can't thread that needle. Listen, I think 6 weeks is just, it's too much. We need more. I've said we need more from the beginning, but I'm going to vote for 2 weeks because of what goes on in Minnesota, which I'm going to lie about. Absolute nonsense from a pathological liar and a moron. So that's what he said most recently. Well, what did he say 24 hours before that? We played this clip in a previous video, but I'm going to remind you, this is what Trump said the day before the clip I just showed you.
You overturned,
everyone does.
I think
everyone
Roe,
does, yeah.
And you want abortion to be a states' rights issue. In Florida, the state that you are a resident of, there's an abortion-related amendment on the ballot to overturn the 6-week ban in Florida. How are you going to vote on that?
Well, I think the 6 week is too short. It has to be more time, and so and I've told them that I want more weeks.
So you'll vote in favor of the amendment?
I'm voting that I am going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. Look, just so you understand, everybody wanted Roe v. Wade terminated for years, 52 years. I got it done. They wanted it to go back to the states. Exceptions are very important for me, for Ronald Reagan, for others that.
In that clip, he signaled that he would be voting in favor of the amendment. I'm going to vote, in favor of not 6 weeks. So he signaled that he was going to vote in favor of the amendment, effectively overturning Governor DeSantis' 6-week abortion ban. And now he's saying the opposite. And the reason he's saying the opposite is because he was obliterated in the marketplace of ideas and online by evangelical conservatives on social media. People were furious with Trump for daring to contradict himself. We talked about it in the video yesterday. Apparently, it got so bad, as we discussed in yesterday's video, that the Trump campaign had to release a statement immediately saying Donald Trump was not committing to voting for the amendment. He was not doing that. He was not doing that. He was just saying what his personal preferences were. So he put his foot in his mouth. He put himself in a really unworkable situation because when it comes to abortion, Republicans are the dog that caught the car. What are you going to do with it now? But also, this isn't the first time Donald Trump has flip-flopped on abortion either. This is just merely the latest in a long series of flip-flops. Here's some other ones.
I'm very pro-life. I'm very pro-choice.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle? There has to be some form of punishment.
I am pro-choice in every respect. Right now, in a number of states, the laws allow a baby to be born from his or her mother's womb in the 9th month. It is wrong. It has to change.
Precisely. He has said so many strange and contradictory things, talking about how women should be punished, how there are post-birth abortions. Then he says it should be a state's issue. Then he appeals to what's going on in other states to determine what he's going to do in his state. Again, the amendment that he could support would basically allow for abortions up to 24 weeks. It would go from 6 weeks to 24. So even if there were the ridiculous, dishonest things that he were describing in blue states, that wouldn't be happening in Florida. The constitutional amendment in Florida is not proposing restrictionless abortion up until birth. It's not doing that. So he's lying. No, he's just so confused and stupid and dishonest. Even the rationale doesn't make sense. And that's how you know he's screwed on this issue. Chris Hayes talks about this. Trump's flip-flop and obviously buckling to hardcore anti-abortion forces in the party is a political godsend for the Harris campaign. Shows he'll do whatever they tell him to. Speaking of Chris Hayes, he had a pretty good panel on this topic last night after Trump's flip-flop, going from I'm going to vote in favor of more than 6 weeks to I'm going to vote against the amendment, which would expand it to more than 6 weeks. Again, that flip-flop. This is what Chris Hayes on MSNBC had in terms of a panel afterwards.
So he seemed to say, I'm going to vote yes on this referendum. I'm going to vote to secure abortion rights. I think the 6-week ban is bad. He got hammered like over 24 hours, walked away from it, has now done an apparent 180 today. What do you make of it?
I think it's incredible that anyone in the media can have a conversation about Kamala Harris allegedly flip-flopping on anything when Donald Trump is giving us a masterclass in the last 24 hours in like the literal definition of flip-flopping. But worse than that, Chris, it's another example of the central question we have to ask ourselves, not just with Trump as a candidate, but God forbid he becomes president again. Is women's health to him a political tool or a genuine policy proposal when he's talking about anything from abortion to, I don't know, the government now suddenly paying for people to use IVF, which I would implore him to actually explain whether he even knows what that procedure is or what it entails. It's a disaster. I think the one thing is clear. Nobody should believe anything he says because he'll listen to whoever talks to him last. And apparently this time it was Marjorie Dannenfelser from the SBA list.
So that is a phenomenal point by Alexi McCammon there, which is, as we speak, MAGA Republicans are complaining that Vice President Harris has flip-flopped from positions between 2024 In 2019, 5 years. They're complaining. How dare she change her position on fracking? You can't just change your opinion. Oh, Donald Trump just changed his position in 24 hours on a major issue like abortion. He's just kind of flexible, right? I mean, he's a guy who's reasonable and rational, and he can be moved on these topics. The hypocrisy is staggering. Now, MAGA Republicans won't care. They do not care about principle. Donald Trump is profoundly unprincipled. But you and I should be making fun of them for this, among other things. We should be saying, listen, we're not interested in any of your opinions on whether or not the vice president has flip-flopped on a position. She's entitled to change her positions over a course of 5 years. That's infinitely more reasonable than Donald Trump changing his position on a Florida constitutional amendment in 24 hours. Donald Trump is just objectively worse in all ways by orders of magnitude. That's the attitude that we have to continue to exude from our pores when we engage with the worst of the MAGA Republican cult. There is no criticism they can make about the vice president that Donald Trump hasn't done far worse. And we also have to set that expectation accordingly. Like, listen, if you want to criticize the Democrats and the vice president, by all means, there's plenty to criticize, but we have to have a consistent standard here. So if you're going to complain that her positions have changed and you're a Trump supporter, I need you to first admit that what Donald Trump did was much worse, and I want you to condemn him for doing it. If you're not going to do that, then we really don't need to have this conversation, because it's really not about consistency and standards and facts. It's about you all bending over backwards and gerrymandering a standard that is all about hurting the opposition. You'll let your guy do or say whatever the hell he wants, whenever he wants, but you want to hold the opposition to impossibly high standards, which you will then change on a dime in order to injure them politically. It doesn't work for us. And so I love this. I think that this is going to potentially hurt Donald Trump immensely, as long as we Democrats make a point of it. Because what we should be doing is using this to sow dissent in the Republican ranks to the best of our ability. And maybe it's going to be challenging. Maybe it's virtually impossible, because it does tend to behave like a cult. But say Donald Trump says one thing on Monday, says something else on Tuesday. What's to stop him from taking out a third position or going back to the first position the day after? Can you really trust this guy? I don't know. Just hilarious stuff that he says. He says literally one thing on one day, contradicts himself on the next day on the same topic, on camera, shamelessly. And so we have to make fun of him relentlessly about it. And in the meantime, you let me know what you think in the comments.